We're live.
Okay, just confirming the live stream. Sergeant, will you please start your recordings? PC recording has started.
Cloud recording and backup recording are rolling.
Thank you, and good afternoon, and welcome to today's remote New York City Council hearing of the Committee on Public Safety. At this time, would all council members and council staff please turn on their video? To minimize disruption, please place electronic devices on vibrate or silent mode. If you wish to submit testimony, you may do so at testimony@council.nyc.gov. Once again, that is testimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you, Chair Adams. We are ready to begin.
Good afternoon, and thank you for your patience. I'm Councilmember Adrienne Adams of the 28th District in Queens, and I am the chair of the Committee on Public Safety. I want to thank the members of the Public Safety Committee who have been hanging in there all day and appreciate your patience. Joining us from the committee currently, Council members Holden, Riley, and Brannan. Today, the committee will continue its ongoing work at reforming the NYPD by conducting oversight and hearing of legislation that collectively aims to promote increased transparency and accountability and improve public trust of the department. The following items are on today's agenda. First, we will be conducting oversight on NYPD performance indicators. We will also hear resolution number 1762, calling for enactment state legislation S6760 to grant civilian law enforcement oversight entities such as CCRB access to sealed and protected records to support investigations and disciplinary proceedings for misconduct by police and peace officers. The oversight portion of today's hearing will be an examination of how the NYPD evaluates its performance and that of its officers in meeting the department's critical mission of improving quality of life and promoting public safety for all New Yorkers. Neighborhood policing, an approach to law enforcement that emphasizes the importance of police and resident collaboration in tackling community issues, offers police departments an opportunity to evaluate officer, precinct commanders, and overall department performance on a variety of metrics beyond traditional measures, such as fluctuating crime rates and the quantity of enforcement actions. Although the modern NYPD has been recognized for its groundbreaking use of data-driven policing, this approach has been criticized as resulting in department policies that place too much focus on quantity-based enforcement metrics in a manner that breeds heavy-handed policing. Most notably, this was seen in the unconstitutional use of stop, question, and frisk and allegations of quota-based systems, where officers' promotional and overtime opportunities allegedly depended on meeting internal enforcement quotas. While the NYPD Federal Monitor has credited the department's improvement in implementing performance evaluation systems that more holistically examine officer performance, there remains ongoing allegations related to the department's use of quotas and claims that officer promotional and overtime opportunities continue to depend on meeting internal enforcement quotas. I believe this oversight hearing offers the council and the public a vital opportunity to examine the department's practices related to evaluating officer performance, how the department measures success, and in turn, how internal priorities are reflected in this process. Additionally, we will hear resolution number 1762, asking the state to grant access of sealed and protected records to civilian law enforcement oversight entities, such as the Civilian Complaint Review Board, to aid in their investigations of police misconduct. This needed reform, which was discussed with CCRB Chair Davey at our last hearing, will provide the CCRB with another tool in advancing its important mission of ensuring police accountability and investigating misconduct. We have also been joined by Councilmember Menchaca. Thank you all. I look forward to the department's testimony. I will now turn it over to our moderator, Committee Counsel Josh Kingsley, to review today's procedural items.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience, and thank you, Chair Adams. I'm Josh Kingsley, Counsel to the Public Safety Committee. Before we begin testimony, I want to remind everyone that you will be on mute until you're called on to testify, after which you'll be unmuted by the host. I will be calling on panelists to testify. Please listen to your name to be called. I will be periodically announcing who the next panelist will be. The first panelist to give testimonies will be representatives from the Civilian Complaint Review Board. The second panelist will be representatives from the NYPD, followed by members of the public. Testifying for CCRB will be Executive Director Jonathan Darsh. For the second panel, we will hear from representatives from the NYPD, specifically Deputy Chief Kevin Maloney, Inspector Stephen Capasso, Captain Ari Mas, and Michael Clark, who's the Director of Legislative Affairs at the Police Department. I will call on you when it's your turn to speak. During the hearing, if council members would like to ask questions of the administration or specific panelists, please use the Zoom raise hand function. I will call on you in order. All hearing participants should submit written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov. I will now call on members of the administration to testify. Before I begin, I will administer the oath. Members of the administration, I will call on each of you individually for a response. Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before these committees, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Executive Director Darsh?
I do.
And we might as well swear the PD panel in as well for now. Deputy Chief Maloney?
I do.
Inspector Capasso?
I do.
Captain Mass?
I do.
And Director Clark?
I do.
Okay, thank you all. CCRB, Mr. Darsh, you could begin. Thank you.
Chair Adams, members of the Public Safety Committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I am Jonathan Darsh, Executive Director of the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and I am here on behalf of our chair, the Reverend Fred Davey. He apologizes for not being here this afternoon, but he had a scheduling conflict. I'm here to testify today in support of Chair Adams' resolution calling upon the New York State Legislature to pass and the governor to sign Senate Bill 6760, legislation to allow access to sealed and protected records to civilian law enforcement oversight entities conducting investigations and disciplinary proceedings for misconduct by police and peace officers. CCRB access to sealed records is critical to our agency's ability to investigate all allegations of misconduct, particularly as we take on the investigations of racial profiling and bias-based policing. Statutes created to seal arrest records that are often sealed due to police misconduct are used to prevent the CCRB and other oversight entities from investigating the underlying misconduct that caused the arrest to be sealed. Records are often sealed because they are the result of unconstitutional stops, which lead to arrests, or they are instances where a prosecutor will decline to prosecute a case because the officer did not have a sufficient level of suspicion to warrant a stop. Cases may also be dismissed and sealed if a court finds that the police did not have probable cause to arrest or reasonable suspicion to conduct a search that yielded evidence. Allowing the CCRB access to records of these cases will mean that the CCRB will be able to conduct thorough, effective, and timely investigations. Currently, the CCRB is required to either seek an unsealing order or obtain a release in every case where the NYPD denies a document or BWC request on the ground that the record is sealed. This causes significant delays, often resulting in the CCRB being unable to fully investigate a complaint or the investigation not being completed within the 18-month statute of limitations. The resolution calling upon the New York State Legislature to pass and the governor to sign 6760 will allow our agency and all civilian oversight agencies in the state to ensure that some of the most vulnerable New Yorkers, all of whom are improperly arrested or summoned, to have their cases looked into by independent agencies. It is imperative that the CCRB have access to these and all documents that enable us to investigate police misconduct. The CCRB has made great strides in the last couple of years and continues to push forward changes and policies that make the agency more effective and police accountability fairer and swifter. I believe this resolution and the passing of state law will help us continue to push forward in addressing police misconduct across the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Executive Director Darsh, again for your patience and for being here testifying before this committee once again. What type of sealed records does CCRB envision obtaining?
The most common type of record would be records sealed pursuant to Criminal Procedure Law 17060 or 17065, which are in cases where there's been a disposition in favor of defendant and the case has been sealed, or Family Court Act, which governs juvenile cases, which may prevent us from viewing records relevant to our investigations.
So once those records are open to the CCRB, you would be able to, can you give more specific examples of how exactly this process in obtaining access to these records exactly benefit CCRB in potential investigations?
That's a very good question, Chair Adams. The most typical example would be in a case where a person has filed a complaint with us that they were improperly stopped. And as a result of that stop, they were arrested and given a summons, and that summons was later resolved, or that arrest was dismissed with a violation or an adjournment in contemplation of dismissal or dismissal. And in all of those cases, their arrest records would then be sealed. And there's a lot of information in those records that would be extremely useful to our investigations, especially now that early next year, when the CCRB begins investigating cases of racial profiling and bias-based policing, where we're going to need records about incidents, interactions between police and civilians where we might not have a complainant, because we're looking at conduct by an officer who has been accused of bias-based policing or racial profiling by one civilian, but has interacted with numerous other civilians, and we have no way of knowing who those civilians are to get a waiver from them.
Interesting. Executive Director Darsh, currently, are there any mechanisms available for CCRB to obtain sealed records at all?
Yes, but they're very time consuming and resource intensive. We have to go to court in cases where we are unable to get a waiver from the particular civilian or civilians involved in the investigation. We have to go to court and get an unsealing order, which is time consuming, sometimes difficult, and often a barrier to us getting the information in a timely fashion.
And what's the approximate time frame, would you say, for this to happen? Is there any like standard time frame, 10 days, 5 days?
So I think it's more measured in months, Madam Chair.
Okay, 5 months, 3 months, 6 months.
So there's one case active right now that I'm aware of where it's been more than 6 months, but what often happens is, because it is so time consuming, we forego the process.
So you just give up, you abandon ship and forget about it because the time that it takes to do this is just too much.
We conduct the investigation as well as we can with the information we are able to get.
Okay, and usually, what does that look like? And when you know that you're missing information and potential, can potentially change things radically. I mean, what does that look like from your perspective? It's
extremely difficult for us to get dispositions on the merits of the investigation when we are unable to access the information. So in cases where we conduct a full investigation, a disposition on the merits means that we are either able to substantiate misconduct, or say that the allegation was unfounded, or say that the allegation should be exonerated, which means that the conduct alleged occurred but was appropriate under the law and the patrol guide. In cases when we are unable to get all the information, we are far more likely to have to either unsubstantiate the case or not conduct a full investigation at all.
What would you say would the percentage, let's say, of cases like this that go through CCRB where you are unable to obtain records that would, fortify cases?
That's a very good question, Chair Adams, and I'll get an answer to you later. I don't have the percentage broken out by cases where we are unable to get a full investigation.
Okay, I'd be curious to know that, particularly in knowing, the barrier on time and the cases that are lost because you all have to give up and kind of abandon the process.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
whenever you get that, that'd be great. Are there any alternative sources for obtaining information contained in sealed records at all?
Really, no, ma'am. Sometimes when body worn camera footage is sealed, there's oftentimes other footage available that from other sources, but it rarely matches the quality and the audio in a body worn camera. And then a lot of the information in the paperwork is just information that would only be in that paperwork.
So it sounds to me that, you've got a lot kind of prohibiting the process from going forward. That should really be more of a straightforward process without a whole lot of hindrances, keeping CCRB from doing what CCRB is supposed to do.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Committee Council, do we have, we've been joined by Councilmember Powers. Do we have any questions from my colleagues at this point?
Councilmember Holden, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Director, for your testimony. I just want to, there's a lot of reasons why and something will be sealed, records would be sealed, right? There's a host of reasons. So I'm a little in the dark about this, about why something is sealed, why. There's a lot of reasons, right? How many reasons are there that records would be sealed?
So I couldn't give you an exhaustive list, but some examples are cases where a criminal case has been resolved without a criminal conviction. So a person pleads guilty to a violation, or a case is dismissed, or there's a not guilty verdict, or there's a adjournment in contemplation of dismissal, or there's a family court proceeding that results in, and I should know the technical term for this, when there's a juvenile who's been accused of a crime, but the equivalent of a not guilty verdict in those cases.
So do you think that the police should have access to sealed records to catch criminals as well? Like, let's say there is an active investigation and they're trying to identify a suspect. Should they have access to the records, the
As
sealed
executive
records?
director of the CCRB, I'm not really qualified to speak to that. I can only speak to the circumstances that are preventing the CCRB from effectively investigating allegations of police misconduct.
Yeah, because the Bronx defenders now are currently suing the NYPD to prevent them from looking at their own NYPD records. So it's a kind of, it should be a two-way street here. We're going to allow CCRB to investigate. We should allow, sealed records. We should allow the police. To really investigate.
Councilmember Holt, I'd just like to say it's not quite an apples to apples comparison, because many times cases are sealed because someone has been the victim of inappropriate police conduct. And to then prevent us from investigating police misconduct because of a law that was designed to protect people who have been potentially the victims of misconduct, seems to me, and frankly, I think to the staff of the CCRB, to be an unfair equivalency.
It's unfair to release the records that have been sealed to catch criminals to further their investigation. I don't know. I don't know. I think it's a two-way street, I think. However, I just think that there has to be good reason to suspect that there might be some wrongdoing. That's why you're asking it to be on seal, not just every case. Because otherwise, couldn't this go on forever? I mean, these accusations could go on for decades then, couldn't they?
So I don't know how that's possible because of the statute of limitations that affects misconduct investigations and misconduct cases. But I'm sorry, Councilman, I just don't.
You don't see a, okay, all right. I mean, it's fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Holden.
Chair, there are no other council members with questions at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't have any follow-up questions for you. I just, I appreciate my colleagues' line of questioning, of course, and taking a look at this and both sides. I think it's important also that that be recognized as well, and that, you know, we have right now, as Councilmember Holden said, we have right now district attorneys that are looking for information, you know, concerning, you know, their cases. But can you just go a little bit farther into the differences between those examples and what we're talking about with the CCRB and the lack of access?
So I think a good example would be in the upcoming case investigations into racial profiling and bias-based policing, where the CCRB may need access to stop and frisk paperwork or arrest paperwork or summonses for a particular officer to look at their conduct over a certain period of time, where we don't have any possible starting point for the other people who that officer has interacted with. And those people are not the targets of our investigation. And so the purpose of the sealing statute, which I think was to, and I'm not an expert on this, Madam Chair, but I'm pretty sure it was to protect the rights of people who have been accused of criminal conduct, but not convicted of criminal conduct, to protect them from having the fact that they were accused of misconduct used against them. And here we are seeking to look at the conduct of a police officer or police officers who have been accused of misconduct, to look at how they are behaving with the people in the community whom they are policing. So we're seeking access to information that is sealed, not to take action against the person whose record was sealed.
Okay, thank you for that. And I was under the presumption as well, I guess you can't answer this, that the DAs can get the records if they want them. So I don't know.
Well, I used to be a DA. I'm no longer a DA, so I can't.
I thought so. I thought so. So I wanted to like tap that a little bit, but thank you very much, Director Darsh. It's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for your testimony here today. Committee Council, are there any further questions from my colleagues at this point?
There are not.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Director Darsh.
Have a nice day, man. Nice day.
Thank you. NYPD, you could begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Adams and members of the council. I'm Deputy Chief Kevin Maloney, Commanding Officer of the First Deputy Commissioner's Office of the New York City Police Department. I'm joined today to my left with Inspector Stephen Capasso, Commanding Officer of the Personnel Orders Division. To my far right is Captain Ari Mas, the Commanding Officer of the Risk Mitigation Division, and Michael Clark at my immediate right, the Director of Legislative Affairs Unit. On behalf of Police Commissioner Dermot Shea, I want to thank the council for the opportunity to discuss the extraordinary lengths the department has gone through to properly evaluate the effectiveness of our officers and our procedures to promote the right people to the right positions at every level. Neighborhood policing, first and foremost, is about building trust with the communities we police. But there's also been a lesser commented on, but equally important aspect to neighborhood policing, building trust with the men and women who are tasked with carrying out this vision. Historically, officers and members of the public lost confidence in our evaluation and promotional structures, which have helped erode trust both inside and out of our department. For these reasons, Commissioner Shea and his predecessors in this administration have redefined the idea of performance evaluation and completely retooled the entire evaluation and promotion framework. The NYPD aims to recruit, retain, and promote the best by incentivizing quality policing and designing a comprehensive framework under which we assess how uniform officers do their jobs. We consistently message that we are not interested in quantity of our work, but rather quality. We have created a transparent structure which gives our officers clear guidance on what is expected of them in order to excel in their jobs and the goals that need to be met in order to be considered for promotions. The current model of performance evaluation provides 12 specific focus areas. Members of the service are evaluated on a variety of skill sets, including community interactions, recognizing problems, and proper application of law and department procedures. There are 2 mandatory levels of assessment and 2 optional levels. First, data concerning command conditions and officer performance is compiled on an ongoing basis, and this information is used in the preparation of monthly officer profile reports. The purpose of the monthly assessments is for supervisors to monitor an officer's performance and to give short-term guidance and feedback in between rating periods as needed. One vital aspect of this sort of direct assessment is the first in the nation body camera audit protocols. Sergeants are required to review a random sampling of body cam footage from each platoon on a rolling basis to evaluate the officers on a variety of factors, including whether they were professional and courteous, whether the officer conducted a stop in a constitutional manner, and also the officer's tactics. This is in addition to the audits conducted department-wide by the Risk Management Bureau and other executives. Second, each supervisor in the patrol, housing, and transit bureaus must complete a quarterly evaluation of each of their subordinates, with the 4th quarter evaluation also acting as their annual evaluation. The 2 non-mandatory assessments are officer's self-report form and supervisor's feedback form. Officers are encouraged to use the self-report form to report positive and noteworthy achievements. These could be substantial community engagements, referring citizens to services beyond those required when dealing with certain crime victims, and other notable acts of problem solving, crime detection, and crime prevention. Supervisor feedback forms are used by supervisors to provide real-time feedback and to document instances demonstrating either extraordinary accomplishment or need for improvement. I'll turn my focus now to how the department determines promotions and transfers. Promotions to sergeant, lieutenant, and captain ranks are non-discretionary and go through the civil service testing process. By and large, the top scorers on each exam are promoted into that rank to fill vacancies as needed. Detectives follow a different track. Officers may apply to open positions in the Detective Bureau. Once there, after demonstrating competent work for approximately 18 months, passing performance evaluations at both the 8 and 15-month marks, they will be promoted to detective. Discretionary promotions to deputy inspector, inspector, and deputy chief are also conducted differently. Members must apply for promotion in these ranks, and after going through a vigorous review and interview process, a candidate may be recommended for promotion to the police commissioner. In an effort to increase the diversity in our senior ranks, we ensure that individuals who are members of the underrepresented communities are chosen to be part of the interview process. Additionally, an important new aspect of how the department appoints precinct commanding officers is the Precinct Commander Officer Assignments Program. This program gives a voice to communities in the selection of precinct commanders by requiring candidates to sit down for interviews with community members and leaders who then recommend the candidate to appointment to the police commissioner. After a successful pilot this year, the program has been expanded to each precinct citywide and will soon be expanded to housing police service areas. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you about the important work we are doing to strengthen the quality of our workforce. And we look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Thank you very, very much, Deputy Chief Maloney, for being here, and your team for your patience, for sticking it out with us today to join us for this important hearing. Thank you. So I just want to say I am an extreme proponent of neighborhood policing. The NCO program has been outstanding in my precincts. And the only glitch that we saw, we did see a glitch even pre-pandemic which was noticeably, noticeably affected my constituents who appreciated the NCOs and their participation. And at one point, when the program first kicked off in one of my precincts, NCOs actually came to my door with flyers. They didn't know me from a can of paint, and they came to my door with flyers, and I introduced myself, and they seemed pretty shocked that I represented the city council, and that I actually appreciated them going door to door, inviting residents, my neighbors, to the meetings, and for letting them know who they were, what their mission was, and for promoting that goodwill in the community. So I can't tell you how much the program has been appreciated. Like I said, we did hit a glitch pre-pandemic when all of a sudden our NCOs just seemed to just drop off. And my ongoing question to my precinct leadership was, what happened? We were doing so well with the pace of the NCOs, and the community was engaged, and the reports were great, and we were coming out to the meetings. And then I don't know, it was a matter of staffing or something like that. And then we came into the pandemic. Coronavirus seemed to just set us all, on our ears at that point. And we were then, looking at, I guess, rebuilding the program and rebuilding those relationships again. So I just wanted to go on the record with saying that the NCO program has been one of the most effective, at least in my precincts that we've seen as far as community policing and partnering with the community. So we just hope that that continues to build and build and build. So my first question is, what measurements or indicators does the NYPD currently use to evaluate its successes, enhancing the quality of life in New York City?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things we can look at when we're talking about how we're successful enhancing the quality of life. We've done a lot of work on building out community surveys. So, part of it is we're asking people what you think. We have our Build a Block meetings and our precinct council meetings, and I hear you about the NCO program. Obviously, that's something that we, all the NYPD, have been very proud of. And COVID, I know it happened pre-COVID, but COVID really made some of this a lot more difficult to have these meetings. But we're always evaluating data. We're evaluating crime numbers. We're evaluating 311 calls for quality of life issues. Trying to see if there's ways we can solve these issues. And I think there's been an increasing focus on collaborative working with our partner agencies and working with members of the community. We've had our precinct solution, I forget the exact name of it, but we're working with members of the community to find problems that they're having and bring in non-government organizations, bring in community members, bring in other agencies to sort of tackle the problem. So there's a lot of factors that we're looking at. And at the end of the day, the goal is to really correct the problem and help New Yorkers have a better quality of life.
Do you engage the public when it comes to evaluating officers? How often is the public engaged? And what does that feedback look like? Are there surveys? What's the response been?
Yeah, so we've been doing the community surveys, and we're rolling out a pilot where people who have been victims of certain crimes, not all crimes, will get a text message from us about it, asking how their interaction was. If an officer is singled out as having done an exemplary job or being deficient in some way, we can create what's called a craft report and put that in the officer's file. And then when officers are being evaluated, the evaluators have access to the whole file to be able to determine if they're getting constant good praise. That'll obviously affect their evaluations.
Okay, so going back to my initial statement when it came to neighborhood policing and COs, how has the department's neighborhood policing model changed the way it evaluates officer performance and overall success?
So, I think one way is, and it's part of the overall philosophy, is we've, in terms of how we evaluate officers is, one of the key components is how you interact with members of the community. And that is sort of, the cornerstone of neighborhood policing is building the trust. And that is one of the key focuses of one of our evaluation systems. So that's certainly part of it. Obviously, there are other issues that hand it over to the inspector.
It's also taking away the pressure from the officer to have to feel they have to go out there, arrest people, write summonses. It's a matter of working with the people that live and work in that community and hearing from them and solving their problems. They took away that stress from the officer. Well, I have to go write a summons. I have to go arrest somebody. That's what this neighborhood is, where we're problem solvers, and that's what they want the officers to be. And that's, I think, what the whole neighborhood policing is, like what you mentioned, Councilwoman, that they knocked on your door, they didn't know who you were. They want to meet you, they want to hear the concerns, and I really think that's what neighborhood policing has done for the officers, made them feel more like a part of the community instead of an outsider from the community. And
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm sorry.
The supervisors make them aware of that. So the supervisors are the people that are, when they evaluate them, they let them know, I'm putting you in for this. I'm going to put my supervisor feedback in for you and give you a positive reward. And that automatically populates by the officer's name on that profile report that the chief mentioned. So it automatically goes into the officer when they sit down every month and say, you're doing a good job with this. We heard from the community. You're listening to their problems. So that's, I really think, the whole basis of the neighborhood policing, what it's done for the officer. And
Okay, so yeah. So we're talking about the community and engagement, community involvement, which is great. Everybody appreciates that. So how does the department determine, when you take a look at the metrics that you're using, because there are several of them, I would imagine, how does the department determine which metrics are appropriate to use during an evaluation process or to evaluate the performance of the rank and file?
Yeah, so I think part of it was done with in collaboration with the Floyd litigation. So the evaluation for our police officers went through that process. We worked with the monitor, who I just like to take a minute to say, we're thinking about his family now, as he passed away recently, and wish the family, wish them well. But the monitor and the plaintiffs helped to determine what the correct formula is for our officers and how to evaluate them, how often we evaluate them, the topics that we should be, reviewing. That was part of that process.
Yeah, we offer our condolences as well, by the way. Are there any best practices in nationally or in other jurisdictions that you follow or take guidance from?
So I don't know if there's a national best practice. Everyone has sort of their own way of doing things, but certainly we are willing to hear from other jurisdictions if they have, something that they find has worked well. We often talk to other jurisdictions about a variety of things, and if something comes out that says this is like the golden standard, we're obviously willing to listen to that. But I don't know if that's something that is out there right now.
Okay. So some of you know or may not know that I'm former chairperson of Community Board 12, elected in this seat in my third term as chairperson of Board 12, the second largest community board in the borough of Queens. And during my time as chairperson of that community board, we heard a lot of stories, complaints, conversation around the issue of quotas and the quota system. And the fact that, NYPD said no, the public said yes, other people said maybe. Your position on quotas these days, has the department ever implemented the use of quotas in evaluating officer performance, period?
So no, our position is we've never done that. I think what we've done recently is really stress that we don't do that. We want to make sure that everyone from the top to bottom knows that we are looking at the quality of your performance, not the quantity. That's always been department policy, but we want to make sure that everyone knows that and is aware of that. And that's how the modern department is behaving, is that we're talking quality, not quantity.
Okay, so what are the methods that you use to evaluate that quality performance?
Sure.
So with the federal monitor, they came up with 12 dimensions for the officers. If you like, I can mention them: problem identification solving, adaptability and responsiveness, judgment, integrity, application of law and procedures, community interaction, department interaction, professional image and maintenance of equipment, quality and timeliness of written reports, initiative, leadership, and implementation of proactive policing strategies while on patrol.
And so some of these things are, as the chief mentioned, where all our supervisors have to do some monthly checks on body worn camera video. So in addition to seeing them in the field when they're with them, when they're not with them, they'll see some body worn camera video. Sergeants have to review all stop reports to determine whether the officer behaved, was acting constitutionally in their stops, right? So these are various factors where we can get in and view the officers' interactions and how they're doing it. But again, it's to make sure that they're doing things properly and well, not that they're just doing them a lot.
And also on the monthly report that he said that the supervisor sits down with the officer, does it monthly. So in case a community concern came in and it's in the officer's area of his, where he patrols, he might say, look, you might want to address this. There's a traffic condition that's going on there that may be causing some accidents where people are getting hurt. What can we do over there to stop the people from getting hurt? So they review it monthly so it doesn't get out of control. And that was part of the federal monitor, to have them sit down monthly and review any community concerns that might be affecting the community adversely, as opposed to any other issues.
Are there any incentives offered, like overtime or specialized assignments, or promotions even? Are those types of things offered to officers based on their performance?
So no, not really, right? So what we try to do is make sure we keep our officers overtime level and to make sure we're not, going over. Certainly, right, if you are applying to do a specialized assignment and you have glowing reviews, you're going to be more attractive. Like in any other profession, in any other job, if your reviews are glowing when you try to move to a new spot, that is going to affect whether they want you there, right? So it does, but it's not, it's not. So yes and no. In terms of promotions, especially at the lower ranks, it's based on the civil service exam to go to sergeant, to lieutenant, to captain. What could impact your ability to get promoted is, poor or, substandard reviews that puts you on some kind of monitoring. Then you wouldn't get promoted while that happens, but it doesn't, it's not like the person with the best hundreds of reviews gets over the person with 90s. It's about how you did on the test, but it certainly affects the way whether you want to transfer to better assignments, they're going to want the person with the better reviews.
So are there any incentives offered at all? It sounds like no.
Well, if you wanted to go to a detective squad, like Mike just said, if you have good reviews, you need to look at that as part of an example of trying to move to a police detective squad to become a detective. So there is that incentive that you always want to have good evaluations. If someone in the detective bureau or ESU or K9 or mounted, any of the units will be looking at your performance evaluations.
I think what's important to say here is that, the way the department through neighborhood policing has really did a 180 with the way we review our officers. Every officer the old system, the new system, future systems, every officer wants to perform to the best of their ability. That's what we want as an agency, to have officers that are doing what we want to do out there. But we've kind of switched gears, and now we expect officers, instead of writing summonses and making a certain number of arrests, to address problems. So when we can identify officers that are out there addressing problems, interact with the community, accomplishing the mission of the police department, and they get higher performance evaluations than the person that's maybe not as effective as doing that, those people tend to move up further in their career. I think that's a good thing. I think it's something going forward that we're going to stay on track doing. I don't think it equates to somebody that's writing more summonses getting a leg up or getting more overtime than somebody that's not writing summonses or making arrests. It's more of a holistic look at the performance of an officer on the criteria that Steve Capasso had spelled out, how we rate them.
Okay, so in taking a look at the other side of that, officers who fail to meet the metrics, certain metrics when it comes to performances, is there discipline involved, or how does that work?
Well, I can kick over to Ari. When there's somebody that's rated, below standards and not performing, there's a process in place through the evaluation process, but that officer could be placed on monitoring. If you want to speak, Ari, just a little bit about the monitoring component of.
So monitoring is broken into several levels. For the sake of performance, it's going to be level 1 and level 2 monitoring. Poor performance evals will trigger a look at by the performance monitoring unit to place the officer on one of the 2 monitoring levels. And the criteria to get on the levels are a little different. Level 1 having a lower threshold. Level 2, since it's more in-depth monitoring, has a little bit of a higher threshold. So at the level 1 monitoring level, it's something called we refer to it as command level monitoring. So myself, my team will work with the commanding officer to develop a plan of action for that officer to kind of turn him or her around in the process so that we can get them up to standards. And that plan of action can include things from training to change of assignment within the command. Maybe they're not working well with their current partner. Maybe they need some extra supervision. Maybe they'll be with the sergeant for a couple tours. Maybe they need to come down to the borough level and speak to executives there to turn that person around.
I'm going to ask one more question. I know my colleague, Councilmember Holden, wants to get in here. I'm just curious to know your thoughts on, the wave of, social media and civilians that use cameras, to record, instances of bad behavior. How has that impacted NYPD? What are your thoughts on that? And I'm thinking particularly of the 2 officers in the subway, I believe it was last month, that didn't have the masks on, and the gentleman kind of exposed that, and they kind of pushed him out of the subway. So what are your thoughts, when civilians, report these instances or document these instances? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think we've put out guidance to officers that it's the citizens' right to record public officials doing their job. Obviously, I don't want to talk about any specific incidents, and there's investigations ongoing, but we've seen a lot more cameras out, and most of our officers have body cameras too. So a lot of these interactions are getting recorded one way or another. I don't know that that's a bad thing, but we put it out that citizens do have the right to record officers without getting into details of any specific incident.
And I think that's a good thing too. I think the department's gone to great lengths to instruct the officers that public recording us is permissible and allowed, that we should not interfere with that. I think that message has been loud and clear. I think the body-worn cameras do help with the officers being used to being recorded. Maybe earlier on there was some apprehension about being recorded. In the world that we live in today, everywhere you go, everything you do in New York City is pretty much being recorded by one entity or another. So I think as we move along in the process, the fact that they're being recorded is acceptable by the officers, and they become used to working under those conditions. Whereas early on, when body-worn cameras weren't a thing and citizens recording police weren't as prevalent as they are today, we had some hiccups in the road as we as we move through those incidents?
I think it's impacted transparency and the perception of transparency when it comes to the public very much also, which is something that that we've needed for so long. You know, transparency in the NYPD. I think that it helps at least to foster some more of that trust and that something will happen. There will be penalties for bad behavior. So I think that's impacted it as well. So I'm going to turn it over now to council questions.
Thank you, Chair. Councilmember Holden, you may begin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief, and all the personnel from NYPD. I appreciate the testimony, and I just want to talking about summonses. I don't think we have enough in a certain area, summonses, and I just want to go over a couple of stats that we uncovered under open data. For instance, 131,156 noise complaints in 2020. 246 summonses citywide for noise. Out of those, 131,000. So far this year, this is up till September 27th, 101,000 complaints, 101,374 complaints, and a little bit better, 345 summonses. But that, again, that's better than last year, but it's still at 0.34%. So when you call in a noise complaint, chances are nothing's going to happen or no summons is going to be issued. And I'll just go over a couple in my own precinct because I'm very curious. Last year, let's just take residential noise complaints. This year, 5,000 residential noise complaints. And guess how many summonses, Chief? 0. So, and I had this experience. There was a night that we're turning back our clocks, and somebody across the street decided that they were going to have an all-night party. And it lasted till 3:30 a.m. until I finally was able to flag down a squad car, which had warned these individuals, turn the music down. At 3:30 a.m., turn the music down. They're saying, close the door. This is an attached house. These are attached houses. Close the door, and then the squad car leaves. No summons is issued. 4 times I had to put in 311 complaints, 4 times no summons, until I flagged down the officer. I said, why didn't you summons this guy? And he said, well, we told him to turn it down, the noise. And of course, when the squad car leaves, they turn it up again. Now, I didn't get to sleep that night. And I could have contacted the precinct myself and got it done, but I wanted to see what my constituents are, experiencing, obviously. And I got a good lesson that it's almost impossible to get a noise complaint to a residential issued. Now, these stats are alarming. We need our sleep. We need, like you talked about quality of life. We don't have quality of life when somebody decides to violate the law and have a party and have people on their porch there all day, all night, looking at the cops come, they turn it down, and then they obviously leave and turn it back up again. This is an issue, and again, the citywide stats over the decade has been the same way. So do you know why that we're not issuing noise complaints, especially to residential?
So, I mean, I don't know exactly what's going on with some of this, but I think, going to residential does present some challenges in that we can't go into the house if we're not invited because it's not a crime. I think there is a focus on trying to solve the issue, but it sounds like in this instance, it wasn't solved. And that's, obviously when we leave and someone just turns it back up is a problem. We can go back and, talk to people about how we respond to noise complaints and whether this is working. I know you've had a lot in your district too, not just the residential. So, we can certainly, if it's not working, go back and see what we can do to fix it.
Right, because let's say all noise complaints, it's 8,671 this year so far. And a total, this is including vehicle, loud exhaust, residential, commercial, 68 summonses issued. So again, and last year it's 12,000, and the number is even worse. 12,000, over 12,000 noise complaints, and maybe 37 total summonses of all the noise complaints. So quality of life is very important, especially for Queens neighborhoods where we work, and we have to get up in the morning, and we want to maintain our quality of life. And the chair's community is the same as my community. Many of us work, and we have to get our sleep. And I think all human beings have to get some sleep. We can't sleep, we can't function. And quality of life is very, very important in my district. And talking about the NCO program, that's taken a big hit. And Chief Holmes admits that at one of our hearings, when she said that was one of the first hits when we cut the budget, NYPD budget. Which, Chair, I had predicted that. I said the NCO program, if we're going to cut the NYPD budget, the NCO program will take the biggest hit. And sure enough, we also eliminated the anti-crime, and many of the duties of the anti-crime were given to, believe it or not, the NCOs, and the chief admitted that. So I have a big staffing problem in my precincts, and for instance, there's 4 units out on a particular night in a very large precinct, 7.5 square miles. I got 4 patrols out, and they're holding 4 or 5 jobs. And the NCOs have, like I mentioned, their work cut out for them, but the pressures now on the NCOs is greater than ever now with these the cuts and the extra duties. And believe it or not, that they give out their phone numbers, and they really can't do a lot of their work because they're answering, these noise complaints. They're trying to deal with the noise complaints, and they really can't address it. So what I'd like is an emphasis, if you could, look into this, the emphasis on these noise complaints, but also how do we really bring back the NCO program to what it should be?
Yeah, we can definitely, talk to bring that back, and some NCO program is something we have been proud of. So to the extent it is lowered its level, we would bring it back to try and get it back to where it should be.
Okay, on this resolution, how do you feel about the resolution 1762 about unsealing records for the CCRB? Do you have any opinion on that?
So, I think we have worked with CCRB to try and help them get more access to sealed records. For instance, we now allow an oral representation from a CCRB investigator that there's going to be a waiver, that the victim is going to waive the access in order to start providing that. So we are trying to work with them to clear any hurdles there are, not, unnecessarily stall cases. I think you mentioned the litigation from the Bronx Defender Services earlier, and I think that's an excellent point. We believe that we should have some ability, and we do have ability to use our internal records, but we'd be willing to work with CCRB and the state to help them get greater access and reaffirm our custodial use of sealed records, and in ongoing investigations, or in not ongoing investigations, but in terms of helping fight crime or work with domestic violence victims and a whole host of reasons. So we'd be willing to work with everyone on those 2 sort of twin objectives.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because I think it's a two-way street, and the director didn't think so. But if you're going to unseal the records for investigating police conduct, then you certainly have to unseal the records for obviously investigations that result, from investigations is shooting victims that obviously are going up, and so there's there are gun violence and homicides and sex crimes. We should be able to unseal records to investigate suspects. So I don't see that, again, it's a two-way street, but it's interesting. CCRB director said, well, I don't see the correlation here. I don't see that they're related. It's apples and oranges. I don't think so. If you unseal the records for one body, you should unseal the records for investigations at least. So thank you, Chair. Sorry I took so much time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Holden. I just want to make sure that I'm on the record and just saying that for me, the NCOs slowed down before the budget was passed in 2022. So for at least my precincts, we saw them, kind of, dissipate before that budget. It really didn't have anything to do with, with the lack of funding yet. I'll say, not that some things were not affected, but for, at least for my precinct. Councilmember Holden, your hand is still up. Did you want to come back? Follow up?
Yeah, I just wanted to answer that because Chief Holmes has said that the NCO program was.
Oh, I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that.
And I wouldn't know because I was the last precinct to get the NCO program pre-pandemic, so we got it right around the pandemic, and we did have a few months of they were working before the pandemic, but it's definitely, and they all admit it. They all admit that it's big fall off because not only the pandemic but the cuts, because the cuts they raised in 2000. They raised the NYPD budget in 2014 to fund the NCO program, and then when you scale it back, that's the first thing they're going to be cut, and that's exactly what happened. But thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Holden. I've got some other opinions on that as well, but I'll save that for another hearing. I also wanted to concur with the noise complaints. I just met with some of my constituents a few days ago in my office dealing with noise complaints. So it's not, unique to Queens. However, we have a substantial number of noise complaints in Queens that just go unanswered, and quality of life issues are ignored. Noise being the #1 complaint coming through, house parties, amplified mufflers, you name it. We've got it all in Queens, and it is, I'll just, to the council member's point, those complaints are underserved, and it's just not enforced. For whatever reason, noise complaints are just not enforced. They're ignored. So I've got to put in a plug with that as well, as we are greatly affected in Queens when it comes to noise complaints. So with that, Committee Council, are there any other questions from any of my colleagues?
There is not.
Okay, I thank this panel once again for your patience this afternoon and joining us. And thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll now turn to the public testimony section of today's hearing. We only have one individual who's here to testify. So Ms. Jane, you may go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Niji Jain from the Bronx Defenders. We represent a class of over 3 million people who have been impacted by the NYPD's unlawful use of sealed arrest records. We recently won a court order requiring the NYPD to cease that unlawful use. For decades, the NYPD has illegally been using millions of sealed arrest records in a network of 14 interconnected surveillance databases. When sealed records are disclosed, people experience privacy violations, reputational harm, and targeting based on the mere fact of a prior allegation. As the NYPD continues to disproportionately target Black and Brown communities, the sealing statutes protect the presumption of innocence of millions of New Yorkers and stem racially disparate outcomes. We support the CCRB's important goal of accessing information to hold police accountable. However, the existing sealing laws already permit the access necessary for police accountability and oversight. The barriers are the NYPD's refusal to cooperate and to handle those records appropriately. The majority of records that the CCRB seeks to access are unsealed, and the NYPD should simply provide direct access to those records to the CCRB, which we understand is something that the CCRB has requested. For sealed records, the CCRB can obtain a waiver from the complainant or a court order. And in the rare instances where neither of those is available, the NYPD can provide redacted or anonymized records. We are concerned that the S6760, the proposed legislation, lends credence to a problem that has been manufactured by the NYPD to pit police accountability on the one hand against privacy interests of millions of New Yorkers on the other, when in fact those are consistent goals. And we would urge caution when considering exceptions to the sealing laws that fail to center or even take into account the perspective of the New Yorkers who are directly impacted and whose rights are at stake. Thank you. I would welcome the opportunity to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Jane, for your testimony. How long have you been in your capacity as?
Yes, I've been with the Bronx Defenders for almost 5 years as an impact litigation attorney, and I've been on the sealed records class action since the beginning, since we filed in 2018.
And directly to your testimony, how often do you see instances like this, which you're testifying on? How often do you see instances like this impacting your clients?
Yes, so we regularly see instances where the NYPD has accessed sealed records either through their databases or through, for example, using sealed photographs in the context of a photo lineup or another application, and then they turn those records over to prosecutors who then turn them over to our criminal defense attorneys in the context of criminal discovery. So we see it happen frequently in that context. But more importantly, what I can tell you at a macro level is that in the course of our litigation, the NYPD has told us, has admitted in discovery responses that its network of databases contains over 6 million sealed records that pertain to over 3 million people. So our class, the impacted class, is very, very big. And that data is as of 2019. So you can imagine that the number has only grown as more people have had arrests that were resolved in their favor or dismissed and then sealed.
Okay, thank you. Powerful testimony. Thank you very much for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Seeing no other members of the public and seeing no council members with hands raised, I believe that we could close out the session today. So, Chair, go ahead.
With that said, thank you very much, all of my colleagues who were present here, for your patience and for your being in this hearing today. Thank you to committee counsel, to Josh Kingsley, to Matt Thompson, all of the staff at council, everyone who testified here today, CCRB, NYPD, and of course the public for your testimony today. This meeting is hereby adjourned.